Okay, guys, let's start slowly with the introduction, and people will join as time goes. So, first of all, welcome everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Scaling the transformation. Perfect. So, a couple of things about the talk. It's a bit longer info, but quite important to get the gist why this is so relevant for a lot of the companies. So it said here, gone are the days when it's too big to fail mentality was there. So large enterprises now are forced to operate like startup companies to survive this digital age of speed, agility, and customer centricity. And probably you more than anyone else is aware of that. So at the same time, it is expected to maintain alignment across all levels of a large organization to drive efforts towards the delivery of the highest customer value within the shortest amount of time. So chasing that customer value across the company, totally aligned, is the essence of the problem. So this presentation will show you how a large oil and gas company was able to transform itself to become a nimble startup powered by self-organizing agile teams while guided by a lean portfolio management framework. So this allowed the enterprise to tie the execution of the work to the enterprise strategy. And then the journey was not easy, is what you will see. It requires a mindset shift, which is the hardest bit, the most valuable thing in a agile transformation, I would say, and establishing a safe environment for continuous learning. By leveraging this external expertise of one of the partners to the company, adopting a lean and agile approach and portfolio alignment tools, the enterprise was able to scale its transformation, drive consistency across the organization, and continuously evolve to meet the needs of its customers and the ever-changing landscape of the business. So it's a very, very, very tough challenge. Now, about our speaker, Rochelle Tan is an agile evangelist. She spearheaded the digital incubation program within Chevron's cloud acceleration initiative, and she's accomplished digital transformation consultant, providing portfolio and program level transformation to help companies successfully drive the highest value to their companies. Customers. With over 20 years of experience in agile transformation with small to large organizations from various industries in North America and Asia, oil and gas, IT, finance, insurance, government, and publishing. She's an accomplished digital transformation consultant. So a couple of things before we begin. It's quite important to know, guys, and be aware this presentation is being recorded and will be publicly posted. We are in the process of developing a YouTube channel, and that's where this thing will post it. We have a couple of more past recordings that we'll post. Please stay on mute during the presentation. There will be 10, probably up to 20 minutes QA at the time, at the end of the presentation. And during the presentation, please post your questions in the chat box. So we will answer them at the end during the Q&A session. And we will address as many questions as possible during the presentation. If there are any unanswered questions, we will try to get the answer to you via the Meetup website. Now, before we begin, are there any questions, guys? Any questions from anyone? Any questions? Okay. Well, if not, let's give it a go. Rochelle, all yours.
Okay, thanks, Miha. So, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are across the globe. I'm actually currently speaking with you from Vancouver, BC in Canada, although I'm based in the Bay Area. So hopefully you guys can see my screen. I'm displaying the agenda for today. And in the agenda, very simply broken down into three main parts, and then we'll have the discussion after. So for today, I'll be talking about two challenges. So I'll be going from the first challenge to the journey, and then I'll share with you the next challenge and then the journey that we went through. And then I'll share with you the learnings that we've gained over the years from what we've been doing at Chevron. So let's start. Okay, so the first challenge we had was we had to go through a change, a very big change, right? One of the key digital transformation effort that Chevron has gone through was the cloud transformation. So that was our catalyst for change. Chevron realized that we had, we had to focus on the main line of business, which is oil and gas, but at the same time recognizing that technology is a big part of what we do. But instead of maintaining data centers, the decision was that we were going to shift all of that into the cloud. And the technology or platform of choice was Azure, as you can see in this illustration. In the beginning, the Chevron had a proprietary framework, which was based mainly on waterfall. And so for a while they tried to do that, but it was such a challenge. And so it wasn't getting anywhere. And so they said, oh, why don't we try the agile way? And so small iterative way of building and doing the work. And so what they realized is, or what we realized is that it was essential that we do it that way. There are a few factors, and I'll be sharing that with you in my next slide, of what are the things that we had to go through in order to succeed in this transformation of migrating to the cloud. So we realized that we cannot waterfall our way to the cloud. So what we did was we, despite starting it, but the good thing is we realized that we weren't getting anywhere. So we tried a new approach, the agile approach. So how we did that was we took we started with one team, right? 7 people in there. And then from that 7 people, it actually grew into a team of close to, I would say, 70 people. 70 teams with about 800 people in it. And it was essential for us to recognize as we were growing, while we were building the tools that we needed in order to successfully migrate our apps to the cloud, that we had to understand what it would take for us to go from point A to point B. We couldn't go from point A to point Z immediately, because we realized that it's essential for us to build small in incremental sequence, and then from there we learn over time. So it's none of that one big bang type of deployment. The advantage of this was it allowed us to focus on what's essential, what was the highest priority, to get us moving. And as new use cases were coming up for our migration effort, we were also learning from that, and we were improving our process, our technology, and our methodology as we were progressing. So that was key, and it was I'm very proud to say that we were very successful with that. We knew there were a lot of dependencies that we had to do, so we actually had to restructure in a way. For Chevron, we actually adopted scaled agile, where we organized ourselves. So starting with the cloud, we started as an art, or what we call the agile release train, and from there we grew into a solution train. We had to operate it in that way because we realized that the value stream, or how we organize the people around the work, was essential, so that it promoted flow, it facilitated the flow, as opposed to creating more dependencies or silos. So to execute that successfully, we recognized that we had to be cross-functional. In the past, and you might be familiar with this structure where we had groups for or teams of developers, right? We also had teams of quality assurance people. We had teams of business analysts and teams of for design and so forth. But we realized that in order to be effective, we couldn't work in that siloed approach. So what we did was we actually blended those teams. We broke those silos. So every team that we had a mix of different team members with a mix of skill sets. We have developers, quality assurance folks. We also had designers. We had data scientists, all blended into each of the teams, and depending on the type of work that they were doing. And I would say that that was very successful. And so that was the effort that we did in the cloud, and we learned a lot from it. Beyond that, we also realized that this work cannot just exist within IT, because the work we were doing was not benefiting IT. It was actually benefiting the different operating companies or the business units within Chevron. So we had to go beyond that. We had to learn to translate the work so that there was a common understanding of what we were doing. So the next challenge after implementing SAFe and successfully transforming from moving from the on-prem solution to the cloud was, now that we know that agile works, and I'm not going to say that it was very simple, right? It took a year and a half for us to get to that point where we realized, yeah, this is working, this is going well. We are seeing good progress, concrete progress, that is. But then as we were maturing, we also thought, you know what, now we cannot just contain this effort in this one program. We need to go beyond it, right? Wouldn't it be nice to see, it's not just the cloud, but every single organization or group or teams within Chevron come together and operate in this fashion where we're focused on the work, not on what organization we belong to, or the us versus them type of mentality. So we thought, hey, we need to align on this, right? We need to all come together and work together to say, what is the biggest priority for Chevron? And how do we do that? So I'll give you an analogy. I would say when we started, it's like, imagine, you're with your friends and you're planning for, say, a dinner event, right? Maybe you have 4 or 5 people, you're planning for a dinner event, simple enough. And so you maybe, so let's say I'm person trying to coordinate. So I asked different folks, what type of food do we want? When are we going to eat? And so forth. So that was like going to the cloud, right? We only had a bunch of people. Yeah, it took time to decide where to go, when to go, what we were going to eat and everything. But now we scale that up, right? We're not just feeding 5 people. We have to feed the whole town, or we're going to have a banquet that invites, everybody from a city, right? Feed the whole city. So just imagine the complexity as you add more stakeholders, as you consider the needs of different groups, different individuals. And how do you make sure that everyone understands the direction that you're headed? How do you make sure that people are in alignment or hear what the true sentiments are? So we thought, we need to scale this framework, but how do we do that? So we realized that it's important for us to understand the capacity that we have or what we're capable of doing versus the demand, right? What are our customers' needs are, and when do they need it? What do they need? And this is where we thought, hey, we are at the point right now where we need to mature by applying lean portfolio management, or what we call LPM. And in this journey, from what I'm sharing with you on the screen right now, as you can see, there are, and I'm not saying this is comprehensive, but these are the scaffoldings that we started with, which was essential for us to get going. So to do that, we start off with the common taxonomy. In Chevron, we have many different groups. So I'll give you an example. That cloud program that I was sharing earlier, we have already shifted or transformed since then. So what happened was, with the success of the cloud program, we have expanded that group and have merged with other our utility IT groups, where we are now made up of thousands instead of the 800 that I was mentioning before. We are made up of thousands of people. We are one big platform that is currently known as IT Foundation Platform. So we're composed of the cloud product line. So cloud is just one of the product lines in that platform. We have, just to give you an example, the network product line, the workforce enablement product line, operational technology, data foundation, just to name a few. So we have about 9 product lines within that platform. So just to give you an idea of the magnitude of this of the stakeholders that we're accounting for in this LPM framework that we have, the 9 product lines that I was mentioning to you is just makes up one one platform, and we have 13 platforms. Now, out of that 13, that group of 13 platforms is just one group. There's a lot of other groups within Chevron that needs to come together, coming from, what we call surface, subsurface, right? Different areas, types of business that Chevron is doing needs to come together in order for us to understand what is it that they're trying to do and have a common taxonomy so that we can understand each other, right? It translates. When we say feature or epic, what does that mean? When we have a business case and we say what value we're trying to meet or we're trying to achieve for a certain epic, how do we define the value, right? And so the common taxonomy was important for us. And I wanted to share with you, just for full disclosure, that we are continuously evolving that. So it doesn't mean that when you start off, you immediately say, okay, this is the guardrails or the guidance that we have. And so it's set in stone. That's gonna be there. We'll, etch it in a plaque or something, and so everybody looks at it, and then it stays the same all throughout. No, we do recognize that it's a living, breathing document, where as we're developing and maturing further with our LPM practice, that guidance also evolves. From there, we also look at an end-to-end workflow where we have a common work intake. And so when I say common work intake, and I'll expand a little bit about this later on, it's not just one way of capturing information. We realize that it could come from, top down or bottom up. The next thing is, when you capture information, you also have to account for, how do you visualize, right? How do we ensure that everybody is aware or knows what the demand is, what are the different needs that we have, and then how do we determine when something is ready for our leaders to discuss and prioritize, to determine, because we only have a limited amount of capacity, what are the things we can accommodate? So when we say capacity, we also have to account for budget, right? What our people are capable of? What is the current organizational capability? Do we have enough funding, right, to account for and to support the work that needs to be done? So that's where investment and strategy comes in. And then from there, when we're ready, we give autonomy to our teams or arts. Sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of background. Maybe if I could just ask folks to mute themselves. So going back, when the arts are ready, when the train or group of arts are ready, they can then pick up the work and say, hey, we're ready to work on this. Let me take it from the backlog and we'll start working on it. And I'll show a little bit more visual in the subsequent slide. Now, when things are in flight, we realize that you may be experiencing this as well. What about break-in work, right? There's always something that we can't plan everything. There are some things that come, we don't anticipate, or things that we thought were great ideas, but maybe the business need has shifted, has changed, or new regulations come in. What do we do? Well, that's where we provide an avenue for us to evaluate and see to maybe reprioritize or deprioritize if needed. And last but not the least is, as we're working and as things are completing, we also have to assess and see if we're successful in completing the work. So success doesn't only mean, in the past, and I'm also a recovering project manager. So in the past, when I was working on projects, success is usually determined by, on time, on budget, and within scope. So I'm not saying that's wrong, no, but we go a little bit further than that to say it's not so much of just because we're on time or on budget that it's good enough or within the scope, but we have to validate it and see whether whatever we're developing is actually of value. It's generating the intent, the original intent of the business case. So I'll give you an example. Value would be potentially be increase in revenue, maybe, right? Or maybe the stickiness of customers in when if you were if you had a product that was more public facing. For us, our customers for IT Foundation platform, they're more internal. So our success is gauged a little bit differently. So we focus more on cost savings. We also look at effectivity or availability of maybe some of our APIs. That's why we've created what we call the API marketplace. It's like an Apple Apple store, but it's more for APIs within Chevron. So anyways, I'm not gonna dwell so much on this slide, but I'm gonna move on to show you some of the examples of what I mean for the LPM practice that we have. Okay. So going back to what I've shared earlier on common taxonomy, we actually use target process. Not so sure if you guys are familiar, but target process, it's actually a portfolio management tool recently acquired by Aptio. And so for us, we were very fortunate because we were already Aptio users. And with target process, coming into the Aptio family, we thought that was a great advantage for us because now we can tie the portfolio management work with, the data that we needed that is kept in Aptio in terms of our budget, funding, in the perspective of TBM, or technology business management. But I'll focus more on, for this session, I'll focus more on how we're using target process to support the LPM work that we're doing in Chevron. So starting off with common taxonomy, as you can see, this is not the exact data because I can't share that information, but just to give you an idea how we've used the tool to accomplish this common taxonomy that we were talking about. So for us, target process allows us to translate work that our engineering group is doing versus what our IT folks are doing. So although there's still a little bit difference in methodology, but we want to ensure that when we roll things up, when we're looking at it on a portfolio level, on those big ideas, big portfolio epic level, that there is a common way for us to roll things up. And there's common understanding when we talk about impact, when we talked about what is acceptable, right? How do we move forward from one state to another in our portfolio Kanban? So we make good use of the a visual way of using target process, as you can see. And then from there, we define it the way we want to, obviously with consultation to a broad range of stakeholders within the organization. So moving on, talk about common taxonomy. Now we're moving on to work intake. So when an item comes in, right, there's so many ideas. You've heard me talk about ideas can come from top down. It could also come from bottom up. And in Chevron, as you may have already guessed, we have so many ways of capturing customer requirements, business requirements. And so it is challenging. I'm one to admit that. But having a common work intake to pull in the data from various sources, that's the work that we're doing right now, so that it feeds into target process and it allows us to view it in this Kanban format. So as you can see in this image that you see on the slide, there's a Kanban that you see in here, and there's different states. So you got new, under review, approved, plan. In some cases, the flow of work may be a little bit different, right? If you look at the SAFe recommendation, there's the funnel where it's like if you were working on a team level, the funnel is like your backlog, right? There's no limit to that. Whatever ideas come in goes into the funnel. From the funnel, you go into maybe a review state. And the review state would be a time where people would determine what are the items that are going to be pursued in a sense that we would build a business case for it so that it can be analyzed and prioritized by our lean portfolio management stakeholders, who will be determining which ones do we invest on versus the ones that maybe can, wait for a while, or those where, we decide, we will never be working on those items. And then there's a progression to that, just like what you see in here. It goes from maybe approved, planned, started meaning it's already being worked on. And that's where I mentioned earlier, when a team or an agile release train, or maybe a solution train is ready to pull in what has been planned or coming from the portfolio backlog, then those are the things that would be put in started, or sometimes it's called implemented, right? Or under implementation, whatever the terminology is. Good thing with target process, it's very flexible. So depending on the state that you want to apply, as long as there's, understanding, right, across the board that these are the states that we're going to use, you can configure that. It's not like you have to recode anything. Okay, so moving forward. So just imagine yourself, going back to that decision making that needs to happen, right? You got a group of people. Let's simplify it. Let's go back to that, dinner plan part. Let's do a banquet maybe. So we're trying to decide what we're going to do, what type of food, how many people can we accommodate? Do we create different venues and so forth? Those are the different decisions, right? I know I'm simplifying it, but just relating it back to an organization like Chevron, we have to decide, okay, what are the things we're focused on? Are we focused on growth? Are we focused on modernization? Maybe paying down our tech debt, right? Or maybe we have so much tech debt that we're just drowning from a lot of the bugs or defects that are coming our way. So with that, those are the type of investment and strategy decisions that we have to make. We leverage target process because target process is a way of pulling that data, making things more visual. As you can see in here, there's different options. I'm not saying we're using exact every single thing, but what I'm saying is it's possible for you to use visualization. So in the form of a dashboard, such as this screenshot that I'm showing, you can visualize and see what are the guardrails, the investment horizons that you want to focus on, or at the same time look at where we're at currently, right? Where is our budget going into, and what are our teams working on? So the tool allows us to do that so that we can have meaningful conversations and make informed decisions on what are the things we want to promote to into the backlog, so that when the time is ready, our arts and solution trains can pull them. Well, in our case, we call them, product lines or platforms can pull them in so that they can start working on them. And as they're working, as you can see, the same visual and a combination of maybe the Kanban and other types of views or reports or lists we can use in order to help us have good conversation when it comes to evaluating and see when things are being implemented, do we pursue them? Or maybe there are times where we say, you know what, when we made the decision, say 3 months ago, it made sense, but given the change, maybe regulatory based, or maybe a shift in strategy, the overall strategy of the corporation, we probably need to deprioritize some of the things we said we would, right, to make room for other things. So it's important to think about this, because even us, it's really a challenge, because I think, being human, we like to do a good job, right? We want to not necessarily, well, maybe we want to please people, right? When we say we want to work on something, we want to start it and finish it off it. And even if there's new work coming in, it's hard to say, oh, I've already started on this, I can't just let this go and work on this new thing. Yes, I'll accommodate the new thing, but I have to finish this other one. Sometimes there's a point, and that's where it's really important to come together and have this common understanding and have that mindset, as what Mihail said earlier, because you cannot be sentimental about work that you're doing, right? If there is no more value, or the value has diminished, there are times where you just have to drop something, right? Even though you've already invested time on it, those are considered sunk costs, right? You cannot worry about what's already happened in the past. You got to look at, what value you're working on will deliver for the organization. So if the value has already diminished and there's something else that will derive more value for the company or for your customers, there are times where you just have to, drop something that you might have already invested time on and shift on to the new one. Okay? Because we can only do so much at a certain period of time, and we only have so many resources. We can't do everything. Last but not the least, as I've mentioned earlier, when we say we've accomplished something or completed something, we have to be very objective on how we assess success, right? And so it's important. That's why it's important when you're making your decision in the beginning that you set clear boundaries on what are the exact value or key results. So we actually apply OKR, or objectives and key results, in the beginning, because we have to agree that, yeah, those are the actual values we want to achieve. And then we assess them to see, did we actually achieve them, right? What percentage of it did we achieve, or did we not achieve it, and why? The reason why we do that is not because we want to punish anyone or reprimand anyone for not accomplishing something. Rather, we see it as an opportunity for learning in order to better ourselves or improve ourselves into the future. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to say, that the good thing for using a tool such as Target Process for us is that we have the flexibility to have that portfolio view. We actually, for our work management items, so in Chevron, we actually use Azure DevOps. So on a team by team level, on a product or line level or art level, we actually use Azure DevOps. So it's effective because we can see the work that's happening. We tie, the features, the stories, the tasks, the bugs, the defects, all together. But what we realized that we needed something that that would allow us to see it on a portfolio level. So target process allows us to do that. It allows us to roll up the data, line up the strategy to the different types of work that are being considered versus in flight and so forth. So what I'm showing to you right now is actually an example of a roadmap where in target process, you can view the roadmap and who's responsible for what, or maybe for what particular area that those items are being associated with. So it's flexible enough to give you the ability to view it in different ways. So before I end, I wanted to share with you some of the learnings that we've gained over this experience that we've had. And I wanted to share with you that the work is not done yet. So just because I'm sharing all these things to you, I'm not saying that, you know, we've perfected LPM in Chevron. No, we are still at that journey. There's a lot of learnings to be done. You can just imagine, you know, even for small organizations and, you know, with Chevron, with the size or magnitude of the company, such as Chevron, it is very complex. There's a lot of moving parts. We also have a lot of existing tools that kind of compete, right? And trying to decide what would be best for us to use to make us more effective. So there's all of that discussion that needs to happen. But what was most important for us was we had to be agile in our approach. So not just doing agile, but being agile. So what we realized the most important thing was the mindset, because having that right mindset of understanding that, you know, there's no such thing as working towards perfection, right? That's not the intent here. And we have to at least start something or start somewhere, right? We don't have to get everything ready, written out perfectly on paper before we start building something or testing something. Right now, even though Chevron has been applying scaled agile, and even up to, you know, Mike Wirth, our CEO, has already said, you know, we have to change, you know, the way we operate, the way we think about things, because there's a new way of operating. It does take time, right? It's not something that's instantaneous. It doesn't it's not like a switch you turn on. Think about if you had a habit that you're used to doing something, and then you know, some people have a habit of, or they have a routine, like in the morning you just have to have that cup of coffee, right? In some cases there are people where I know of somebody who before going to bed, he has to check every single window, every single door, that it's locked. So it's embedded in that person that they have to do it. They don't even have to think about it. It's just automatic. So similarly, if you're used to doing things a certain way, it takes time to get out of that habit, get out of that routine, right? To try something new. And so the idea here is slowly, as you're learning this new way of working, you're also changing your perspective, you're changing your mindset, so that in the future you take that agile mindset where you don't even, you know, it's not about checking the textbook or checking with somebody, am I agile enough? No, it's something that's embedded in, it's innate in you, becomes innate in you, that when a situation happens or comes up, because you take that, you know, growth mindset, that open mindset of, you know, trying things out, seeing failures as an opportunity for learning, as opposed to reprimand or punishment, empowering the teams, right, as opposed to command and control, then the decisions you made are driven by those values that you have. And the other learnings that we've had, so aside from the mindset shift, is the complexity of scaling. You know, every single person has a different way of reacting or receiving data or responding to data. And so it's important to take the time to understand or allow people to express themselves and ask the questions, right? Work with them to see what are the different challenges that they're experiencing, or what is it that's not clear or they can't understand that makes this new operating model challenging, or maybe it's not working. If so, let's go back and discuss it. Let's sit down and take the time to see what's not working so that we can shift it. But just think, because there's more people to account for, it is very complex. So you have to consider that people need time, right? You cannot just rush into something. Uh, and so because of that, I would say that's why I wrote it in here. It doesn't have to be perfect, because perfection is the I think the enemy of progress, right? Because if you're always afraid, you're always concerned, oh, if I try something, maybe it'll fail, then you'll not get anywhere. But what we've seen, and in our experience, we just have to try it out, see, right? And if it fails, that's okay. Maybe that's not the right way. Maybe there's a better way, but at least we learn from that. We're not going to do that again. We'll try we'll try something else. One thing I realized I didn't mention is, sometimes when you're starting, it's a challenge. Like, we don't even know what we're supposed to do. So when we started, we actually reached out and went and looked for experts, right? Even outside of the organization, and consulted with them, this trusted advisors, as we call them, because, you know, a lot of them, there's a lot of knowledge out there. I know it is also a chance to find the right advisors, but, over time you'll see who's being effective or not. But we actually reached out to a lot of coaches, to digital transformation experts, in order to give us some ideas. And we even attended sessions such as the session that you're in right now, because different, you learn from different people, right? There's different perspectives being shared, and then you pick up bits and pieces to help you see what would work. Maybe we can try this new idea out, right? See if it works for us, or maybe consult and see if they have any ideas or tips that they can give us. So anyways, I will leave it at that for now. Hopefully you picked up some things with regards to agility and scaling agility in large organizations such as Chevron. So now I'll open the floor for any questions that you may have.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rochelle. That was amazing. I have 5 questions, but I'll allow the floor. We had one from Constantine. How did you scale your LPM initiative from the IT-centric cloud enablement effort, the enterprise-wide initiative, and what part did target process play in it? So perhaps, Constantine, you can answer it better than I did.
So, Rochelle, I'm just interested for, a lot of the transformations that are being started, especially with cloud adoption, they're very IT-centric. You have to establish the things like the foundation and it's like, common good of IT. And, how did you get out of that IT-centric rut, I guess, to get all of these other stakeholders, finance, HR, engineering on board? Because usually they're kind of on a periphery and an afterthought, especially finance. So my question is, how did you do it? And the target process, did it play any role, or what kind of role did it play in this process?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So I must admit, in the beginning, that was the perception that people had, that, oh, there's another, new thing that IT is introducing. It is a big challenge to even start that dialogue. But I think what's important for us was to communicate, right? To bring together people and hear out what they have to say, and at the same time share, some good practices. And we don't claim to be experts. Rather, we're saying that, we're not saying this is what you should do or how you should do it. We start with the why, right? The reason why we're doing it. And usually, when you give people an opportunity to speak and share their thoughts, they actually turn out and become your champions, because everyone wants to make things better, right? Wants to make things easier, simpler. And so if you start with the why, it becomes a better dialogue with the people. And then that helps in onboarding them and to have that common understanding and then work towards a common goal. With the tool, I aside from being a solution trained engineer of the IT Foundation platform, I've just recently been taken on a responsibility of being product owner of the LPM practice for target process in Chevron. But we share the responsibility of being product owners for that team. I know sometimes, but even there's a negative connotation when people say, hey, why do you have a team, one team with multiple product owners? But I think it worked out for us for at least the implementation of target process, because we realized that the work in Chevron is complex, right? There's different people who have different expertise. And I personally cannot claim that I'm an expert on, what the engineering group does, right? What finance does. So what we've done is in this effort that we're doing right now in building the LPM framework or the workflow in target process is we've brought in folks from finance, we've brought in folks from what we call technical, like the folks who are involved in doing the engineering work. And from there, it has been quite a journey, and it does take time, but we share the responsibility of product ownership and product management so that we take into account what are the different needs, the differences, and where we can roll up for similarities using the tool. So that's actually the effort right now that we have, where just recently we actually deployed a great feature where we have common understanding and translation of every single resource or team member in Chevron. So regardless whether you're from digital or IT versus you're a team member from engineering doing more of the project-based work as opposed to IT doing more of the agile-based work, we have a common structure for resources, and that sets us up for allowing us to do capacity planning and regardless, and that we don't have to differentiate or know specifically whether that person is engineering or functional versus IT. So it was a great start for us that helped became the foundation for us to build on top of what we're doing right now for our LPM practice. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
Thanks for the question, Constantine, and thanks, Rochelle. Any other questions, guys? Any other questions? Otherwise,
the question to Rochelle's chat window directly. I don't know if it showed up.
Oh, I haven't been looking. Maybe.
Okay, I'll just
let's help.
I'll read it again.
Sure.
Has this, congratulations, by the way, and thanks for coming. It's quite impressive to listen to what you've achieved there. All these efforts, have you had an opportunity to try or actually using any different funding models, such as lean budget or incremental funding? And if so, can you share with us briefly, how such a process went through? If not, then that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, I must say we have transitioned a bit from our old traditional way of funding projects. So we do fund the value streams where the work is being done, but there is still a lot of work to be done beyond that. So right now we still operate with, there's charge codes assigned to certain products, certain product lines. But what the translation of that is, because our value streams are grouped by the nature of the work that they do, and it's assigned on a higher level, not on a specific endeavor. Like if you were, I'll give you an example. In the old way, say we have a product on maybe that API marketplace that I was talking about, if the funding was solely for API marketplace and there's another effort for, say, a data science effort, then we have to go through the change management process, the change management board to, move the funding from one effort to another. So we don't have a limitation in that perspective where we are actually funding value streams. So the product lines and all the way to the platform level, we've given, or finance has given us the autonomy to move things around as long as we're operating within that funding that we have. Now, question is that in line with how, Scaled Agile defines lean budgets, or how they define, incremental funding? I would say it's not there yet, but we've already, at least we are, we've already progressed, right, from where we were traditionally. So that's where we're at, just being honest about it.
So at least sounds like the foundational work is there, and hopefully they'll get there, as opposed to being haven't tried it at all. Okay, thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Thanks for the question, Iris. Any other questions, guys? Any more questions?
I can always ask another question, Mikhail.
Oh, me too. Go for it, Constantine.
Yeah, if you have a question, go ahead.
Yep, go for it.
Rochelle, yeah, so it seems like a very impressive undertaking. It seems like to drive this type of organizational change, you need to establish trust with your stakeholders outside of IT, enterprise stakeholders. What was how did you go about doing that in order to get all these people on board to buy into a SAFe as the enterprise standard, and all of these agile tools that you rolled out as an enterprise standard?
Yeah, so there were different stages that it went through. I would say, and that's why I started with the cloud program, because that's where, Scaled Agile was first introduced. And instead of just talking about it and, sharing or creating PowerPoint presentations of how great or what this, framework can do, it was applied to the program. And I think the outcome that the program generated from migrating, hitting the mark, hitting the targets of the apps that were migrated, and even going above and beyond what was essential or was needed on a year by year basis, clearly showed that the framework does work. And so I would say what made it successful in terms of showing that the framework works is by showing the outcomes, right? Show it instead of talk about it. The other thing was, in terms of buy-in, there was also, it didn't happen overnight. So from what, the people who were close to the work have seen, they developed, as they were seeing progress time over time, they slowly bought more into the framework. At first, I would be very honest in saying that everybody has some sort of hesitations, right? But it takes, those lean agile champions to be there to say, hey, just try it out, right? What have you got to lose, right? If it wasn't working with the existing way, we should at least try something different. Over and above that, it was a slow introduction as well, in terms, and I say slow not because it took so long, like years, but more of a gradual progression by introducing Scaled Agile in terms of training and orientation as well. So slowly there was, when Scaled Agile got, the attention on Scaled Agile got picked up because of the success of the cloud, there was an initiative to to give an orientation, like brief or orientations to management, to different groups, all levels of management and the folks involved, and even outside of the program. So, and from there, it slowly grew and generating more interest from other groups. So, I mean, even up to this point, there's still, slow education. I mean, there's still education that needs to be done, but that helped, I would say, at least in my
so
perspective.
I guess the key word for me was the outcomes, right? It sounded like you were able to get the work done that you needed to get done to build trust with your stakeholders. You mentioned outcomes. So outcomes for me resonate with, outcome-based OKRs. Are you doing OKRs in target process?
Right now we have, we're doing OKRs in a sense that we have it already created. So I'm not saying everyone is doing it, but I can speak more about my platform. And yes, we take that seriously. And so we've established OKRs. And the good thing with target process is you can either build functionality to manage OKR, but it also integrates very well with, in our case, with Azure DevOps. So we can pull that, we pull that information into target process to display that information. And so we can tie, strategy to the work that's happening and how each of those key results are progressing over time. There's still a lot of work to be done, I must admit, but that's the beauty of target process because integration is simple enough.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Constantine. Okay, let me ask one. Kind of aligned with what Constantine was asking. I'm more interested from, you mentioned that you had an initial team that started driving it. In Scale Agile is basically the lean agile center of excellence LACE. So you probably started with a small team that was driving the adoption / transformation. How did you scale that team? Because there are, like in SAFe, there are a couple of models. One is you make a central team that drives everything. The other one is you enable and everyone goes and does their own. And third one is something in between, hub and spoke model kind of thing. How did you guys go about it?
Yeah, so
transformation team.
That's right. Yeah. So we started off with folks who, expressed interest and had a willingness, right, to take the leap, invest some time to learn and become relatively the experts, right, internally. It also takes a certain mindset to, take on that responsibility. From there, we created the LACE in order to facilitate different initiatives and effort and ensure that we're orchestrating the work in the art level, in a solution level. And then people slowly seeing that, the LACE derives or generates a lot of value for the arts and the program. And so from there, it generated more interest where people were more involved. We also, so that was the start in the cloud program. When we transitioned and became IT Foundation platform, we actually created an open invitation as well because we've established some good reputation. So we created an created an open invitation to invite people to say, hey, if you want to take this opportunity, right, to drive change into the organization, feel free to join us. And we continue to do that. So every PI, when we do our PI objective, when we do our business context, we do an open invitation. And we've seen, so because of this success, a lot of the other platforms are also asking, how do we form the LACE, right? How do we do that? So now we kind of operate more of a hub and spoke type of model where every platform creates their own LACE, but we roll up together because we have center of practices that come together and meet together in order to, share learnings, share different tools or techniques that we've learned over time.
Perfect. Thanks so much. I have one more question, but let's hear from the others, guys. Any questions from anyone else? Any questions? We are just about on the mark, 1 hour mark. So perhaps one question from anyone else, guys. If not, let me ask, which LPM metrics, did you use any LPM level metrics and the target process help you with? Were you tracking any metrics across the portfolio at the high level?
Yeah, so right now we use more the OKR to determine how we're meeting our objectives or not. The actively we track more on the, I would say more on the art level and the solution level. So we do predictability measure because we take the business value to see how much we've met or did not meet our customers' expectation in the form of those PI objectives, right? And the business value and the actual business value. We marry that information with flow metric. So although we're not saying that we capture everything on a portfolio level, but because we don't roll it up in a portfolio level, but portfolio by portfolio, we can capture, and we've started with IT Foundation, where all the product lines, we've captured the flow metrics, marry it up with the business value or business results, so that when we make decisions of what we see from the flow metrics, we can also validate to see whether it's moving the needle or not on a business value perspective.
Brilliant, thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions, guys? If not, I would like to.
I have one.
Yeah.
On the same train of thoughts,
Go.
that with scaling, in terms of sizing, relative sizing, were you challenged, or are you using any sort of like a Rosetta Stone or any sort of a common scaled way of sizing, and is that needed in your case, or do you have pretty much, a 2 versus 5-story points are pretty much the same or different? Actually, maybe an earlier question would be how well practiced is like relative sizing, like the story points or ideal days versus hours, and if so, in terms of scaling that, do you have any actually models of scaling, or do you have challenges with that?
Sure. So on a team level, we do relative sizing where we've shifted away from the hours. But I must admit that for more on the infrastructure type of work for us, it made sense for us to have some translation of points to hours. But when it comes to like software development, data science, and so forth, relative sizing has been very effective for us. Now, in terms of scaling, when it comes to epics and portfolio epics, let me talk about portfolio epics. So for portfolio epics, for us, we decided not to use story points because it's really hard to do story pointing for portfolio epics. They're very large, chunks of work. And so what we've done is more on like what we would call t-shirt sizing, but over and above, so we have like small, medium, XL, and anything XL and above, we would consider portfolio epics, versus anything else below that would be considered like program epics or something else. Now, our criteria is not based solely on that. When we're doing planning or magnitude of work or the complexity of the work, it's not just the size we look at. We actually look at it on a combination of different criteria for us to decide when we do our strategic portfolio review of what makes up a portfolio epic and whether it's something we will pursue or not. So we combine it with, how much or how many platforms and product lines maybe will need to be part of it, the dependencies or the complexity of it in terms of dependency. We also take a look at the relationship between what an initiative or an epic would deliver, what outcome it would deliver in relation to the strategic themes that we have, because our strategic themes have actual key results in there. And so we want to see how strongly they tie. And so we do a combination of that in order to make those decisions. So it's not solely on the size itself. hopefully that answers the question, Art. If not, maybe
No, it does. I think the other was wondering is if at an art level you have situations where multiple teams, let's call them software teams, if they are comfortable with story points. Do you have a situation where two or three or more teams work on different parts of a larger system? Have they used scaling in terms of saying this team and this team agree that a 2-point would mean this and this comparable things to the team? So at least at an art level, you can have an art level story pointing, which is
yeah, actually for us, I'm going to be very honest that we decentralize that. So usually, right, and we've also consulted with other folks like outside of Chevron that the sizing is usually it revolves and is focused on the team. We cannot compare what a two story point means on team A versus team B. We can roll it up because the tool, right, allows us to do that, like ADO allows us to do that. And so in a way, eventually as teams mature, there is the roll up of the number. I mean, we don't take that as a definite number, right? Like there's still some subjectivity involved. We realize that, but to standardize, maybe some of organizations have done that, but for us, we actually do not or did not embark on that endeavor to standardize what story pointing means from to standardize it across an art or at least a group of teams. We allow them to translate it the way whatever makes sense for them.
Because what happens actually, the rolling it up endangers people comparing team velocities, which is a no-no. But it helps. I mean, from let's say in a financial institute where let's say one team is working on something for mortgages, somebody's working on savings. The underlying technology might be similar in that, but that comparing apples to apples, it actually helps to see, especially when you're dealing with lines of business, how to shift resources as well. It's helpful in that sense, at least in my little experience with that. So I was curious, especially when you're in an energy sector, and I mean, I had a question.
Yeah,
I was wondering,
maybe there is value on that. For us, we haven't come to a point where it was a must for us to standardize. In terms of shifting, we actually try to avoid moving people around. I know and I want to admit it is a challenge, but at least for our platform, we work on long-lasting teams, and I'm very confident to say that's how we've been doing. There are some exceptions, like there are some skill sets where we don't need them to be dedicated to one team. So I'll give you an example, like our usability experts, some of our like risk compliance experts. But when it comes to especially our developers, quality control, quality assurance team members, we actually dedicate them to the teams. And it has been very helpful for us doing that when we have to shift people around. And we've seen that as well on some of the other platforms. It has become a challenge, not so much, I haven't heard so much on the relative sizing part, but more on just efficiency and for them to have consistency, because it does affect your velocity when you move resources around.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Apologies, Aris, we'll have to cut it short. Rochelle has to go to bed. It's in the middle of the night, and we've got 10 minutes over. So just to thank you very, very much, Rochelle, for staying so late. Wonderful presentation. very, very happy to hear such a great effort, and good luck with your future endeavors. And to everyone else, guys, thank you for joining. A couple of people had to leave before that, but yeah, thanks, Rochelle. I think
Yeah,
it
thank you.
was
Yeah, thank you for having me.
really
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you so much. So, guys, hope to see you next time, and Rochelle as well. Please feel free, although it's midnight, join our meetup at some other time. We'll try to do it lunchtime next time, so it's a bit better for
Okay.
you.
No, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Great,
Have a
great.
good night.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
you too. Thanks. Bye-bye. Good night.
Take care, guys. See you.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks, Meow. Bye-bye.